Ladies and gentlemen of the board. Today we're going to talk about our district cultural responsive instruction and our behavior intervention practices so that you guys can get a better idea of what's going on in the classroom as we move into a new era in terms of our culturally responsive district. So first off, what is culturally responsive instruction? This basically is a way in which we make our students feel valued and that their unique cultural perspectives and strengths are celebrated, encouraged, and used to provide for a better learning environment for all. How do we do that? Well, we do that by using behavior support practices, things that make a level playing field for all, celebrates those differences, celebrates what makes all of our students unique, our teachers unique, and what makes this, as we like to use to say, USD 26 wonderful, as we all know. Now, these practices are vital to our students. We're going to talk about some of those as we go forward, and some of these, as board members, you'll be very aware of, and some of them maybe you don't know because you're not in the classrooms on the day-to-day basis like me and all of my fellow students and teachers are. So hopefully we'll educate you guys and get you guys some information to help make sure that we are doing everything we can for our students. So some of the support services we offer that are culturally responsive, of course, Capturing Kids' Hearts protocols, those are our first line of offense, if you will, in these. These protocols include our social contract, which allows for students themselves to make sure we have our non-negotiables, 100% effort, no bullying, all those kind of policies, and they allow for students to check themselves. You also have in push and a more or less mandate by most teachers to get to know students, and this helps us become more culturally responsive, if you will. Prevention oriented, of course, we have our hotlines, we have our reporting plans. At most every school we have our anonymous reports. The students can fill in whenever they are feeling not listened to, and that goes for they can report teachers, they can report principals, they can report students. It allows for everyone to have a sense of your voice can be heard and will be heard. We implement evidence-based interventions. Okay, if we see that we have a growing population in a district, in a school, we get those ESL services, for example, in a building that needs them. We help move students to those buildings they need to do to be successful. And we do this a lot with our Parent as Teachers program, our early childhood programs, and our district special ed programs. All of those three big keys help us identify early cultural differences and needs and wants for our district early on, and provides them education from pre-K all the way to 20, 21 years old if they need it. We have our after-school programs with Spark. We have school social workers. We have the positive behavior intervention systems in every district. At the high school, they do parent-teacher conferences that are student-led, which allow for students to share the great things that they're doing in class and give that ownership so that they can celebrate what they're doing great. And of course, we have bilingual parents in all schools. So, who and level of impact for these culturally responsive instructions. All staff in every building is responsible for identifying the students that would benefit from these resources. Of course, we've all been told if we see it, say something about it. And we only have a few district-wide social workers. So honestly, as a plea to the board, I know funds are strapped and we did just push through a new contract. But the school needs more social workers. There should be a social worker in every school. We shouldn't have to set, I think, 3 for all the elementary schools, 1 for the middle school and 1 for the high school. Our social workers are overworked. We need funds to be moved to that because we do need, and we are a growing population that needs more social outreach and more help from that area. So, like I said, behavior policies, behavior management techniques are used at every level of our buildings. Teachers see a decrease in minor disruptive classroom behaviors when we use these. I'll bring up the example of the BMF form that we use at HMS. We have a behavior management form where students have a series of strikes that they can accumulate. And these could be minor disruptions. Most of the time, they are minor disruptions. And eventually, they get to the 3-strike form that helps them sort of gear positive behavior and understanding of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable, and allows for them to make mistakes without ultimately finding out massive punishment. It allows for sort of this slow and gradual correction that we have, and it provides a lot of great opportunities for students to choose the right option, if you will. We've seen a massive decrease in the last year or two, last 2 years since we really started pushing this model of behavior management, with a decrease in office referrals as well as out-of-school suspension. Now, we could use a little bit more support from our support staff. It does seem like there's a big breakdown between lunch personnel, custodial staff, as well as I know most of my students couldn't tell you any of their names, and that is, I guess, a area where we could definitely use some improvement. So, some culturally responsive techniques that we can start implementing in our building if we are struggling with it, and we are in some classrooms. We are, let's be honest. Simple things like pronouncing names correctly helps. Being culturally responsive to reflect on fears, stereotypes, and biases that we ourselves bring into the classroom, into the building, and to try and eliminate those. And I'm not going to cover all of these because, of course, y'all can read them here, and I'll leave it up for here in just a second as I'm talking because I'm long-winded. But small things like developing teacher self-efficacy. We have to be reflective as teachers. Am I doing the best thing I can for my students? Am I being accepting of people's cultures? And am I being sensitive towards their needs and wants? Other things, small group instruction, peer tutoring. Peer tutoring works great for ESL students because you'll match them with someone who is a bilingual student who speaks English and the second language fluently, to help with the student who's still learning to grasp the English language, to help them translate. Because as someone who's worked with kids in foreign languages and spoken to people in foreign languages, there are times the English language doesn't have a word in their language, or their language doesn't have a word that translates directly to English. So having those groups, those people to go back and forth with, it helps build that knowledge of the language, and it helps massively in terms of that. And all that comes from building background knowledge. Teachers and staff members, principals, everyone in our building, everyone in the district office, everyone in the entire district needs to build background knowledge. We need to be more culturally savvy, if you will. So, behavior support practices, of course, school-wide, classroom-wide recognition systems through PBIS, we use that. Enhancing awareness of any mismatching funds. Development of school and social skill curriculum. And, of course, our community family interactions and school family interactions need to be built up. We don't do enough with building and outside building interactions between staff and parents. Most of the time, for me as a teacher, when I interact with a family, it's oftentimes, I would say 95% of the time, in a negative context, in a context where I'm having to talk to family members about why their student's not being successful in my class, or why their student got in trouble in my class for that day. If we had more positive interactions between school and family, I think that would build a massive help in terms of nipping some of these behaviors. So benefits. Currently, students would benefit from this, but we do serve a small population at HMS as well as the district in terms of minority, but we currently have, like I said, a small African American, small Mexican American population, a small Asian American population, but we have seen an uptick in that population is continuing to grow as we continue on as a community. So we need to start investing in those services, because if we start now making sure we're ahead of the game, it's a preventative measure. And to be honest, being culturally preventative to make sure we have those steps in place to make sure all minorities and all people are welcome in our building, then we don't have to be responsive. When we're responsive, that normally means that something bad has happened. We need to be preventative, not responsive. The best way to implement these would be a hybrid between our social skills curriculum, which we do have through the Second Step program, and it needs to be a combination because we need buy-in. I will be bluntly honest with you. There are teachers throughout the building. I'm not here to name names. I'm not going to point fingers. But there are a lot of teachers and staff members throughout buildings, district-wide, that don't buy into this. They click through the slides. They don't go over with the kids. They don't have meaningful discussions. We have those, and that starts being a buy-in, just like capturing kids' hearts. It took 2-3 years to get everybody to buy into it. Once we got buy-in, it made a big difference. That's kind of where I think the best method of increasing this should come from. So, thank you guys. I will, of course, send all of you this presentation to include my resources here. Have a wonderful day, guys, and I appreciate you taking the time and let me talk to you today.